Alright, the button has been pressed. I think I remember to change the batteries. If not, we'll get about 5 minutes, but it's okay. Alright, I've given, or at least so everybody can have access to, a handout here that talks about the kinds of parallelism in Hebrew poetry. Again, if you wanted to listen to any of the Psalm 119 sermons that I preached a few years ago, I cover all this in there, and these are the major issues of Hebrew poetry. There's one other one that's called the chiasm. We'll talk about that a little bit, kind of an X thing in the text. I'll explain when we get there. But you have X and X plus 1. You just have kind of a number added to the other 6 and 7 like you see in Proverbs 6. The synonymous parallelism we've already covered. That is probably the most common, where two lines are set next to each other that are pretty much identical. They're mutually interpreting, just restating things for emphasis. Then we have the antithetical, one that is positive, one that is the opposite, negative. A synthetic, we're going to run into a large synthetic parallelism today. That one probably is the most confusing. It takes a lot of different forms, but the main idea in a synthetic parallelism is the one idea builds on the other. So 1:1 is probably the clearest and best one that I can find. You have a progression. Blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers. You're walking, you're standing, you're sitting, the wicked, sinner, scoffer. There's a progression in that. You have 3 lines. Sometimes there are several lines in this, and we're going to see that today in verses 10 through 19. The climactic parallelism, easy to just keep stating the same thing over and over again. Psalm 29 there on the back is an example of that. And then emblematic parallelism, simile or metaphor. This is like that, or this happens as this happens, or he is a pig, or something like that would be a metaphor. Those kinds of illustrative materials. Very helpful with understanding Hebrew poetry, of which Proverbs is almost completely. So, Proverbs 1, 8 through 19, we had just come off, of course, the first 7 verses with the climax in verse 7 in the introduction to the book of Proverbs. We see the purpose of it, wisdom. You're going to be gaining wisdom in this. You're going to avoid being simple. You're going to understand Proverbs, wisdom, the riddles of the wise. And then he gives us in verse 7 how that is going to be accomplished. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. Fearing God. Truly knowing and understanding this God. Kneeling before Him, worshiping Him. Giving Him the respect He deserves. That's where knowledge really is going to come from. It's not to say, of course, that we can't know anything apart from God, but if we're going to have the fullest understanding of something, we need the fear of the Lord to have the perspective in this world that really is right. This is, after all, our Father's world. To refuse this turns you into a fool, because you're despising wisdom and instruction. Remember, a fool is someone not just who is lacking wisdom, but someone who is morally in the wrong. Verses 8 through 19 give us a couple of things. First, we have a bit of an introduction, verses 8 and 9, talking again about the value of wisdom, the value of parental instruction. And then we launch into an example of sinners enticing this son, this young man, or by consequence, anyone really, gives a warning, lays out what they're going to say. The father offers the response to it and tells them what the main problem was in the first place that these people were desiring. Very, very applicable. Much common sense in here. Valued wisdom with regard to riches. So, what are we talking about first? Verses 8 and 9. This section, Father, Son, wisdom is poured out. Solomon giving this information. I suppose directly one could say talking about Rehoboam, because he was the king who was going to be taking over Israel afterwards. Sadly, Rehoboam seemed to follow his father's example rather than his words. But we have father and mother giving instruction. They're put on equal footing as the child's teachers. Exodus chapter 20, verse 12, very important text to keep in mind with regard to this. Honor your father and your mother. Paul picks up on that in Ephesians 6, 1 through 3. First commandment, the promise, honor your father and mother, that it may go well with you, that your life may be long in the land. This is an extremely important issue, which tells us, among other things, that if you see a child screaming back at his or her parents, it's not just, it can't simply be dismissed as it was just a stage, or that's just how they act, or this is okay. No, this is willful, sinful rebellion against God's ordained authority. Let's call it what it is. It's not something cute, it's not something minor, it is evil. And it needs to be dealt with. That's something that cannot be allowed to stand. Honor one's father and mother, extremely important. So, Deuteronomy 21, as a matter of fact, in those lines, talked about how a father and mother had a child who was rebellious, refused to submit to their authority, was reported to the elders of the land, and they took him out and stoned him. Rebellion against one's father and mother is a very serious offense in the sight of God. And it is indeed listed in the list of sins, a couple of a whole lot of other things that we might consider more serious in Romans chapter 1 that Pastor Dave reads from time to time. First, then, as we get into this text, let's look at verses 8 and 9 as an opening to get into the issue of people who are going to entice this son into sin. Verses 8 and 9. Someone read verses 8 and 9 for me, please.
Hear, my son, your father's instructions, and forsake not your mother's teaching, for they are a graceful garland for your head and pendants for your neck.
Thank you. So now we open. We have a father speaking. And this is what's always going to be going on in the book of Proverbs. The father is going to be speaking. He's the one who is going to be presenting the instruction, calling his son in this case or others to respond to his instruction. We're going to see this all the way through chapter 9. A father giving wisdom, pleading with his son to respond properly to this wisdom, giving the examples of foolishness and folly, the examples of wicked men, and answering them directly in most cases, showing what the true way of wisdom is. Now, there is an important concept here. We've already talked about the fact that Solomon is going to be speaking to his son who's going to take over the kingship after him, Rehoboam. But there's a broader concept in mind here. Every father ought to be giving this kind of instruction to his children. Every family in Israel is something that you need to keep in mind. They should be hearing what this man is saying in the same way that Moses put the law of God into the mouth of Israel's parents in Deuteronomy chapter 6, the Shema. For this general answer, every family, we have the word hear. Hear, my son, your father's instruction. Listen, pay attention. But this isn't the first time we've seen this either. If you back up to verse 5, it says, a wise man will hear and increase in learning, and a man of understanding will acquire wise counsel. So a wise man will hear. We've already established that a few verses earlier. And then this father speaks to his son and says, hear, my son. Echoing of verse 5. In other words, be wise, my son. Pay attention, listen to this. Wise men hear instruction. Be like that. Do not forsake your mother's teaching. He wants his son to be a spiritual heir, not just his biological offspring. But we need to notice this. We have the father's instruction. And forsake not your mother's teaching. We have a parallelism here, which of course is not surprising. It's kind of a synonymous one. It really is. Hear, my son. In other words, pay attention, listen to this, parallel with forsake not. If you're hearing it, you're not forsaking it. Your father's instruction parallel with your mother's teaching. This I find fascinating and very important. So we ask the question. Obviously the mother's teaching is involved, so which teaching here has authority? The father's teaching, the mother's teaching.
Hopefully they should be consistent.
Aha, now we're touching on the important fact. The father's teaching and the mother's teaching has authority. And not only that, but since we have a synonymous parallelism, I'll be able to say it consistently one of these days, there really isn't any difference in the content of this teaching. The son is to pay attention to both because both should be really the same thing. They both should be containing godly wisdom. Wisdom that, of course, is contained here and that he's going to be communicating. The father is the one setting it forward, but the text makes it clear that the father and mother are both to be instructors of the children, and that they both are responsible to communicate God's truth, and that it ought to be the same thing that they're saying. Which implies what? Maybe I wasn't...
Well, they're both believers.
Yes. They both ought to be following after the one true God. With a believer being yoked together with an unbeliever is unwise. Paul comes out and says this, I believe, in 1 Corinthians chapter 6. Let's keep in mind, too, Paul, in most cases, didn't have an original thought, as it were. He was building on, in a fulfillment idea, of what has already been revealed in the Old Testament nearly always. These kinds of thoughts most certainly were running around in Paul's head. He knew the Old Testament Scriptures probably better than anybody in this day. So, they both ought to be believers. How about on a practical level? There really shouldn't be any kind of disagreement over the matters. The mother and father should be on the same page. The content should be the same. Something that they need to be together working out so that there isn't conflict in how the children are getting instruction. Very common, very easy to do, but guilty of myself. That's not how it's supposed to be, because the father's instruction and the mother's teaching are in parallel. That'll be the same. That'll be consistent. We need to be on our knees before God that such things indeed will be the case. Because we all know our own sinfulness and the tendency for us to have not just disagreements, but contradictions. So, instruction, teaching. Instruction and teaching, words that mean slightly different things, but again, they're in parallel. They interpret each other. We go back to verses 2 and 3. Psalm is talking about instruction. What's the point? To know wisdom and instruction. That is why these proverbs are given, to discern the sayings of the understanding. Teaching. The teaching idea presupposes a relationship. There is going to be an understanding that the people who are doing the instruction are going to have some sort of intimate relationship with those who are given the teaching. Obviously, in the case of father and mother, children are going to have that contact. To keep a societal understanding with regard to Israel in mind. Instruction. Teaching. So, verse 9. You need to keep your father's instruction and mother's teaching in mind. Why? Well, there's the word for. It kind of links it together, makes it a couplet. Here's why. They're a graceful garland for your head. They're pendants for your neck. A graceful garland. These are a chain around the neck. Symbols of honor and life. Of course, you see the they. What is the they? It's a pronoun. We need to know what the antecedent is. What comes before that? They what? What they?
The instruction and teaching.
The instruction and teaching. These things that are the wisdom of God, that are coming down from God to the parents, through the parents, to the children, they're a graceful garland. They are a chain, a necklace, or ornament around your neck. So what's the point of a garland or something around one's neck? Sure. And that understanding is, well, historical before the Greeks, too. You speak even back to ancient Egypt and Israel. If someone is wearing, say, a garland or almost a crown-like thing on their head, the idea is that they have prestige, that it's a symbol of power, a symbol of life, victory and vindication over one's enemies. High social status. So, people who obey this teaching respond to the leading of their godly parents. This kind of teaching, this instruction, is a graceful garland. Not just a crown or something, but it's a graceful one. It's pleasing, it's attractive to others, it tends to promote favor. So the symbol is you're going to have victory. You'll have power in life, prestige, high social status. Of course, once again, we need to keep in mind that Proverbs are general principles. This is not an absolute fact, because every now and then people who have no regard whatsoever for wisdom are going to treat those who love wisdom like fools, such as the world in which we live. But generally speaking, this wisdom that comes from God through the parents to the children gives status, gives prestige, it gives success in life. But it does more than just that. Pendants for one's neck. Guidance, protection. They're put on display figuratively as a necklace. Maybe to help protect one's neck, maybe again to demonstrate beauty and wonder in it. As a metaphor, it points to the reality of parading and reciting the teaching. If you're going to have them on your head, they're going to be adorned around your neck. Jewelry, think of it as gold, think of it as beauty, think of it as splendor. One's life, therefore, is going to show forth this wisdom and this instruction, and it's going to be a favorable and attractive thing.
I think it would imply as well an intentional putting it on.
Indeed.
You know, not just that your mother and father have taught it, so therefore you have it, like it's indwelt, but you have listened to it and intentionally are wearing it.
That is an extremely important point. Very important indeed. These kinds of things don't just happen by accident. You can sit and soak and receive all sorts of instruction and teaching, but if one does not appropriate it into one's life, then it really doesn't have any good effect. It doesn't happen by accident. It is an intention. You put the garland on, so to speak. You put the necklace on. You clothe yourself with this teaching and this wisdom, metaphorically, so that you can live a life that is in accord with this teaching and this wisdom.
All these kind of, for that time period, effectively relate to the men who sat at the gate, the elders, the people with wisdom. You know, fools didn't come and sit at the gate.
They were interested in gaining the wisdom. Yeah, the gate is where a lot of the decisions were made, considered maybe the court of the city, if you will. Things were discussed, or decisions were made. Wisdom was exchanged. And the elders of the land will be identified as such, perhaps by symbols such as these. So Solomon sets this up. He says, all right, my son, listen. Get this. Listen to what your parents tell you. There's wisdom in this. Don't forsake what they're giving you. It'll protect you. It will show you that you are smart, that you are wise. It'll be obvious in your character if you take part in these, if you appropriate this wisdom and you live it out in your life. Because they're wicked men who will try to get you to do just the opposite. And oh, how true that is. He wouldn't have to tell him and emphasize it with that parallel structure to hear the wisdom of God through his parents if there wasn't so much negative influence trying to pull him the other way. And we see that with verses 10 through 19. There are three parts in this. This is a huge synthetic parallelism. It builds on the idea all the way through. It has an opening, verse 10, a closing in verse 19, where the idea is introduced and is directly slammed in verses 18 and 19. And then verses 11 through 14 is one section of the evil men giving their very colorful enticement and suggestion to bring this son into sin. Verses 15 and 18, the father responds in kind, very colorfully and powerfully, shooting down all of their excuses. Bracketed in verses 10 through 19, that's something called an inclusio, which basically is in Latin for inclusion. Think of it as bookends on a shelf. You have the left bookend, you have the right bookend, and all the stuff sandwiched in between is one big subject. That's the idea of an inclusio. It's really, really very complicated and beautiful. Symbolic and parallel arrangement here to get forward a very important point in verses 10 to 19. Do not consent to what evil will come at you and entice you. So, let's start out then with verse 10. So, would please.
My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent.
Very straightforward. My son. Again, he addresses him as my son. The love, the relationship. Presenting here a hypothetical situation. If sinners entice you, do not consent. Well, it's hypothetical, it's not really, is it? Because sinners will entice you. Sinners will probably entice you in some way, shape, or form, either personally, over a TV, over a radio wave, or something that you're going to see on a billboard before the end of the day.
Also sounds like it's going to be peer pressure as well.
Yeah. Indeed. It's going to get to that, but yeah, that's exactly true. Without question. My son, I already told you, my son, what you're supposed to do. Repeated terms. Always latch on to repeated phrases and words. Especially in wisdom literature. My son, what was the son already supposed to be doing? Follow the teaching of spirits. Hear. Be like the wise men. Remember back verses 3, verse 5. This is what the wise men do. They hear instruction. They appropriate that. You, my son, be like them. Hear. Parents that are going to have this wisdom. Pay attention to it. It'll be wreath to your head. It'll be necklace ornaments around your neck. Because my son, sinners, if they entice you, do not consent.
Defined by their actions.
Indeed they are. Sinners. Now we're all sinners. But that's not how Solomon's using the term. He's not just using with a general understanding that all of us are wicked before God, but for His grace. Solomon understood that, but he's using the term specifically here, talking specifically of evil men, people who are intentionally seeking to miss the mark. Disqualifying offense, they're unbelievers. Stated flatly, they're people who are in continual sin. And they're also people who seek to get believers to fall into sin with them.
This makes them feel better about themselves.
Exactly. I'm going to say that because it was very good and it's an extremely important point. Because when unbelievers who are in their sin, first of all, if they see someone who's not living that way, it gets them angry because that life is exposing their wickedness and no one likes that. So, one of the strategies, and I'm sure you've run into this yourself, is the person over there is living rightly. I know it's right, I don't like that. But if I get them to sin with me, then not only does it shouldn't be hypocrite, but it makes me feel better about the wickedness I'm doing, and I can suppress that knowledge a little bit. People joining into sin makes the sin not look quite so bad. Of course, it still is. If everybody's drinking poison, it might seem like a thing to do, but they're all going to die. So it doesn't look as bad when everyone else is doing it, and that's the idea. That's what this word implies. These sinners are trying to get the believers to go down with them. Solomon uses the word with a very strong intention. If sinners do what? Entice. This is no accident. This isn't just, oh, well, yeah, you saw us doing this. Sure, maybe an idea. That's kind of what we're doing. If you want to go along, fine. If you don't, that's fine. We're just going through life. This is how we live our life. This is how you live your life. It's not accidental. It's not unintentional. This is a direct trap. It's exactly right. They're setting a trap for this young man. They're trying to get him to fall into it. This is willful wickedness to try to detract him from the paths of life, the paths of righteousness. There's no accident here. They're trying to get you to be like them. Sinners are enticing you to do what? To be sinners. To try to get you to act like them. Very directly. The response is what? No. Don't consent. Don't. If you're going to entice you, just don't. It's direct. It's very simply stated. He's going to elaborate on it hugely here. But he sets it up at the beginning, doesn't he? They're going to entice you. Don't do it. But no. But would it? No. It's not wise. I've just spent the whole book so far telling you what wisdom is and that what they're doing is not. So they're going to entice you. So no. Sometimes that's what you need to say because of the urgency of the situation. You don't have the time to elaborate on it necessarily. He's going to do so. But on the onset, okay, I'll explain why here in a minute. But what you're asking me, no, don't. But okay, let's get to know first and get you out of danger. And now we'll explain why you needed to be stopped. Parents understand this.
You don't stand in the middle of the street and try to explain to your child why they shouldn't be playing in the street. You take them out of the street.
Exactly. You yank them out of the street, set them on the side, and then explain to them that the truck was going to splat them. It's exactly right. It's exactly right. Do not consent. Not just a negative thing, but what the idea is, it is the first beginning. It's a positive behavior pattern that he's trying to establish. So, verses 11 and 12 start off the first 2 or 4 verses of the evil that these people are trying to get the son to do. 11 and 12, please.
If they say, "Come with us, let us lie in wait to shed blood. Let us lurk secretly for the innocent without cause. Let us swallow them alive like Sheol, and whole like those who go down to the pit."
Thank you. If they say, Now, here's the thing. Are they going to say these things explicitly, necessarily? These exact words?
It's too easy to see the evil.
Oh, yeah. This is the general idea of what it is they're saying. This is the ultimate intention behind what they're communicating. I mean, after all, what does Paul tell us that Satan does? Masquerades as what? Should we not expect the rest of all wickedness then to do just that? Solomon is exposing exactly what's going on. These people are going to tell you that you're going to ambush the innocent without reason, lie in wait for blood, to swallow them alive like Sheol, whole as those who go down to the pit. That's kind of unpleasant. So if they say this is what they're communicating, this is what's really going on, no matter what they might tell you otherwise, or how they may try to deceive you, they're trying to get you to participate in horrible wickedness. So the Father puts these words into their mouths, exposes their true intention, and words that indeed will condemn them. He tells them, come. Listen. If they say, come with us. Not just, here, go off and do that. But come with us. We touched on it earlier. It's a peer pressure idea. get a group of people trying to invite you to do something. And again, it's the whole strength in numbers idea. It seems, for whatever reason, I don't completely understand this myself. Maybe because we are indeed social creatures, and creatures that need fellowship. Fellowship like this, that is supposed to be going on, but we see it in a negative sense out in the world. People that are collecting together to do wickedness, there's a temptation to go along with it. Because
Everybody's doing it.
everybody's doing it, and we are made to be together in community.
It would lead to perceived acceptance,
It would.
which is important to us.
Not just perceived acceptance of us individually, but perceived acceptance of the activity that they're doing because people are getting together and doing it. It's messed up. It's a twisting and contorting of how God has designed us to be.
Gee, funny that.
Yeah, indeed.
That's not right, it's not.
But that doesn't always happen in church.
Oh, no.
In a Christian setting, why don't we go after people and bring them in and try to get them involved in what we're doing?
Use it in a positive sense, sure.
Yeah, we should, but we don't, and so we
Not
get people
consistently.
in and they
But
trip
yeah, I
down.
mean, the desire for community and fellowship is something that God put in us, and therefore
Sure.
it is a good thing when used when done correctly. In church, it's supposed to be done correctly. Now, it isn't always, but it should be. And so that is something that is attractive to new believers.
Sure.
That's something that is a good thing. But again, like everything beautiful that God gives us, if we do it wrong, we can twist it. It's just the way. It's the way of
It's the
sin.
way the world always works. It's how Satan worked in the garden. He's speaking partly what God said, yet twisting it. This is the same trick that has always been going on. The same lie, just in a different packaging, if you will. So he tells them to come. Come with us. Be together with us in this wickedness that we're about to do. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to lie in wait for blood. A term that is used for animals luring their prey into a death trap. Psalm 10, Lamentations 3. Blood, of course, referring to violent death. You're going to shed blood, you're going to kill somebody. They're going to ambush this person. So do it out of surprise. Descend on an unsuspecting victim. A person who is innocent. Innocent blood is the kind of the imagery is split up between the parallelism to give more emphasis. But the idea, of course, now, innocent without reason. Again, Solomon is well aware that we're all sinners, and before God, none of us is perfectly innocent. This is an established understanding. But that's not his point here. The point is these people haven't done a crime that is worthy of their condemnation and death, but yet these wicked men are going to descend on them and take their lives anyway. Unjust taking of life. A horrible violation of God's law. Now they do this without reason. Well, they have the reasons, don't they? They're going to be disclosed in a couple of verses. Again, what's the point? Without reason means...
It's not obvious to the innocent victim.
True, it's not obvious to the innocent victim because of the ambush idea that we're talking about. But without reason, meaning they don't have...
legal justification.
No legal justification. There's no warrant. There's no justice involved here. Remember, wisdom is supposed to lead to justice. We talked about that last week. Justice, righteousness, equity. That's not what this is. This is shedding blood and ambushing someone without warrant. That is what wickedness entices us to do. They're motivated by something, all right. It certainly isn't righteousness. We'll find that out here very shortly. But let it, like Sheol. What is Sheol?
Right?
The grave, the underworld, the place of the dead is what it is. Sheol, the pit is put in a parallelism with this. Sheol and the pit, same place, descriptions of it. Generally speaking, in the Old Testament, when they talk about Sheol, it means just the place where dead people are. It doesn't necessarily mean hell, though it can. But generally, it's just the place of the dead. That's what Sheol is. So in other words, we're going to kill it. We're going to take it into death. That's what this is. Swallow them alive and whole. Them. In other words, this is not an isolated incident. This is the pattern of life of these people. Of death and destruction. In them. Follow them. Again, they probably wouldn't spout this out and make it very obvious, but this is their pattern, and Solomon uncovers that to show the true intentions of people that are pursuing this kind of activity apart from wisdom. The pattern of life. To do it whole, to swallow them alive, again, they're unsuspecting, and they're going to do it without any restraint. And why do they want to do this? So verses 13 and 14. Here's their motivation.
We will find all kinds of precious wealth. We will fill our houses with spoil. Throw in your lot with us. We shall have one purse.
What do they want?
Money,
Money.
They're bandits.
Stuff.
That's what they're doing.
things.
Stuff.
They
Yeah.
want stuff, they want money, they want resources. They're going to kill and murder and do what they have to in order to get it too. James talks about that, James chapter 4. Paul talks about that. 1 Timothy 6, what's one of the most quoted and misquoted verses in the entire Bible? 1 Timothy 6:10. The love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Not money is the root of all evil. That's wrong. The love of money. Not money itself, but loving it. That's the problem. Money is amoral, as it were. It can be used for good. It can be used for wickedness. But if you love it, that's when you've crossed into sin, and it creates all kinds of problems, as Paul goes on to say. The one who does so pierces himself with many griefs, many pangs, many sorrows. It wounds you. It causes destruction. People ruin their lives over the pursuit of wealth. And here they ruin the lives of others. This is what they want. Greed is their motivation. And there's a lot of deception here, too. Here's what we're going to do. You come in here with us, what are we going to do? We're going to find all kinds of stuff. We'll take these people out, we'll kill them, we'll be able to take into their houses and take their stuff into ours. We're going to fill our houses with plunder. So come with us. We'll have one purse together, we'll share it all equally. We'll get this. Oh yeah, this will be great.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Is that honorable thieves thing?
It's going to be easy. It'll be safe. Notice there aren't any warnings here of possible pitfalls. No, hey, by the way, you might want to watch out for the guards that might be in the area because they could catch us and kill us if we try to do this. No, nothing like that. Isn't that how sin works? It tells you all this, the greed here and the so-called benefits from doing this wickedness, but doesn't really warn you about the fact that, God has established, in this case, all the guards, the police, if you will, and they could stop you and they could kill you. No, we're not going to talk about the possible dangers to ourselves. We're going to go headlong into the sin because we want money. Sin is very deceptive like that. It promises all kinds of rewards, but never warns about the consequences involved. But there are always consequences involved. And they can be deadly. We shall fill our houses with plunder. Lies. So throw in your lot among us, so we can all go down together. That's what it's going to do. You see, sinners, again, these sinners, these people who are outright in rebellion against God and seeking to bring the believers down with them, they love wealth. And they're seeking to use people, in this case, to take their very lives to get it. The saint is just the opposite, isn't he? How are we supposed to be saints who love people and use wealth to help others? Just the opposite. That's the right view of life.
I think this might be a good time to point out that today we have kind of separated violent crime from white-collar crime. But there's really no difference. Because in my way of viewing something, if you have worked for 6 years and accumulated $10,000 and somebody steals that, then they have stolen that many years of your life.
In some sense.
It's the same way, in the very sense.
Yeah, right.
That's what you worked for those whole 6.
The application really comes in the same way. It's you're going to kill somebody and take their stuff, or you're going to take away someone's hard work and take their things they've invested their lives in. You're still in slightly different, but much in the same way, taking someone's life. Take part of it. Robbery, thievery, there's a reason why God said you shall not steal. Or by murder,
Just a part of it. Because hopefully the accumulation of wealth is not our entire life.
Right. And you're absolutely right with that regard, but the point still stands. Sure, the point stands is that this wickedness comes, and it can come in different forms. It's not just, again, it's not just somebody's waiting on the side of the road seeking to stick a knife into somebody's back. This, again, Solomon isn't saying this is exactly how it's going to play out step by step here. Much of the same way the Lord's Prayer that Jesus gives us, or the disciples' prayer, of example, wasn't to be recited exactly. It was a structure, a pattern. This is how we're supposed to pray. These are the elements that ought to consist of our prayers. These are the elements that are going to be present in someone who is seeking after gain and seeking to undermine someone and take their lives. It's not going to look exactly like this, but this is what's going on behind the scenes with everybody who is seeking to get after gain.
But even Christians seek money. I mean, like if they're looking for a job, they don't always pray and ask God which job should they take. They're like, who's going to pay me the most money? How can I get the most? And they cover it with, this is for my family.
The excuses that we tend to generate to justify our activities.
Exactly. So we're not excluded from being money grubbers or money motivated. And it's something we need to always keep an eye on.
And with that in mind, that's the whole point of this. How did Solomon start this? My son, here. And my son, don't consent, don't consent. Here's what's going to come at you, my son. Why would he have to tell him if it wasn't a danger? Why would he have to tell him if it wasn't something he was going to be dealing with? Obviously, it is a danger. Obviously, he was going to have to deal with it. And it was such a danger that Solomon was writing this out very carefully. This is what's going to come at you. It's going to be tempting. They're going to entice you. They're going to seek to get you to be involved with them and chase after gain rather than after God. Again, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Let's always keep that before us. He says, don't consent. Don't do it. And now verses 15 and 16. Excuse me. My son, do not walk in the way with them. Hold back your foot from their paths. For their feet run to evil, and they make haste to shed blood. The rebuttal comes. The father uses his own very illustrative material to respond to the clever ways that the ones are trying to get him to fall into sin. His vivid images come forward, and he confronts it directly. Before he said, do not consent, now he says it again in ways. Do not walk in the way with them. Do not go there. And he elaborates on it. Hold back your foot from their path.
Yeah, don't even put your foot on.
Exactly. Don't do it. Don't get close to it. And here's part of your chiastic juxtaposition is how I put it in the notes. A chiasm thing. We have in between verses 15 and 16 we see it. My son, do not walk in the way of them. Hold back your foot from their paths, for their feet run to evil, and they make haste to shed blood. He uses the foot term on both ends of it as kind of this cross structure. We have just the one this way. Foot and then feet. That's a way of going with emphasis. It's called the chiasm, or at least half of one. Not super important, but kind of a neat thing. Now, do not walk with them. Answers almost verbatim what their appeal is in verse 11. Remember that? What do they say in verse 11? They say, come with us, let us lie in wait and ambush without cause. Lie in wait, come with us. He says, no, don't walk with them. Don't do it. They say come, I say no. Keep it back. Hold back your foot from the path. Keep it back and refrain. There is effort involved here. You can't just sit back and expect this stuff again to be absorbed and for activity to be produced. You have to work against the wickedness in this case that is going on. Hold your foot back because you're going to be tempted. And part of you may well want to do it. Hold your foot back.
That's a quick, rich scheme. It's tempting.
Sure. But again, their motivating reason, for their feet run to evil and they make haste to shed blood. Loving this money and this greed kind of thing isn't just the white-collar crime of our John's example. There's death associated with this.
Another reason to be careful is you might be the actual individual.
Yeah.
Well, there is that. Come with us. We're going to leave you to get stuck with it with a cop show.
That's what the old adage, like if you're ever playing poker and you don't know who the patsy is, it's you.
There's truth to that. Please also know how quickly this is going to come upon him. You see, they're setting this up and making it look like it's easy to be able to get a bunch of wealth at the expense of somebody else. But you see, their feet run to evil.
Well, who's to say they're not leaving them out there to rob them?
That is part of the point. But their feet run to evil. Please note it doesn't say their feet walk to evil. He's used that term already in this text. Their feet might eventually come to evil. Their feet run to evil. They're hastening on to get dead. They make haste to shed blood. There's your parallelism idea again. They're quickly going headlong into this disaster. It's not something that's going to come later. You can't just put your foot on the road to it as you were and maybe just get a little bit involved and be spared the majority of the consequences. The point is, you're running headlong into it, and if you start to get involved, you're going to be brought down quickly. Sin is very deceptive. And here's part of the cure. See how dangerous it is, and how quickly ruin will result from it. That is the danger he's setting forward. Don't be fooled by sin. It wants to fool you. It'll make it look like there's easy gain to be had from it. And that a lot of people are going along and doing it, and the wickedness is befalling them, even though they're planning to do horrible things. But the truth is, you go in that, your feet are running to evil. Disaster will come. Verses 17 and 18. Don't read those, please.
How useless to spread a net in full view of all the birds. These men lie in wait for their own blood. They waylay only themselves.
Foolishness to spread a net in the sight of any bird. Like, okay, what are they talking about here?
Putting up the trap in the side of the animal you're trying to catch is just good.
That's exactly it. Not only is the way of sinners wrong that he's been talking about so far, it's stupid. Sin makes you stupid. Flat out. You have this bird you tried to catch, so it's flying around. Let's take this net, let's throw it right up in front of the bird. What's the bird going to do? Turn it and fly away. Every time. You know, God has put it into birds at least some level of survival intelligence to keep away from that stuff. You don't throw your net up in front of something and expect it to be successful. It's stupid to do that. Like, oh yeah, that makes sense, Solomon. Good. Okay, it's vain, it's stupid, it's foolish, it's not gonna work. Good. So, carrying on the idea of foolishness and stupidity here, he says, verse 18. These men lie in wait for their own blood. They think they're going to get somebody else. Maybe they will kill them, but the truth of the matter is, they're going to kill themselves. They're ruining themselves. They're setting an ambush. There's that term again. He answers the charge directly. Let's wait an ambush for this innocent person and take his life. Solomon says they're setting an ambush for themselves. Ruin is coming to them. Their own blood is going to be shed. They didn't tell you that when they were enticing you, did they? They didn't tell you that when they said there's going to be an easy way to get plundered, did they?
Yeah, it's because this is almost a direct parallel to the B and C portion of
verse 11.
Verse 11.
That's exactly right.
And the lovely thing about this is that the robbers, the sinners know that they're waiting to shed blood, and they're lurking for the innocent without cause, but they don't realize what they're actually doing is because they do not have the wisdom to see it.
Exactly.
They don't see that what they're actually doing is lying in wait for their own blood and lurking secretly for their own lives.
I'll probably say it again before we finish class today, but what happens when you love money? The love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Those who chase after it pierce themselves with many pangs, griefs, sorrows, sufferings. Who do they pierce? Themselves. Who are they going to pierce? Themselves. They lie in wait for their own blood. They set an ambush for their own lives. He answers the enticement of the wicked person directly and finally. This is what's really going on.
Later on, he's going to say something about he who rolls up the rock, he's going to roll back on him, and he who digs the pit falls.
Sounds familiar, yes. That is part of Proverbs. Later on down the road, I think in these first 9 chapters, where wisdom is indeed brought forward strongly before we get into the couplets of chapters 10 and on. But, exactly. Like, here's the truth. This is what they'll tell you. This is what they'll try to get you to do. This is what sin in general will tell you, and what it'll try to get you to do. Here's the reality of sin. It destroys you. Your life is forfeit. Not something to play with.
It's a trap, run away.
It's that same line. Surely he didn't mean you to die.
Yeah,
Exactly right.
thank you. Yeah.
Hasn't changed. Has not changed. Same line. God didn't mean that. Yes, he did.
Yeah.
Oh, but it looks so good. No. Don't consent.
You don't know my circumstances, though.
I'm special.
Yeah. It'll never
Ask
happen to
Solomon
me.
about that one.
Yes. Don't know your circumstances. God does.
He still
But I'm
says no.
special. No, you're not.
That's why the Proverbs tells us not to lean on our own understanding.
Proverbs 3, 5, 6. Exactly right. Because why? Because our own understanding in and of ourselves is saturated with sin, and it's going to kill us.
Because we're stupid. It might even be
Yes.
stupid. Yeah. And you can't fix
No
stupid.
matter how we, well, no, but you can redeem it.
Well, you can, but you can't fix it.
God can take care of it, but we're not going to fix it on our own. We need His grace. We need this kind of thing. You see, this is what happens. And just in case somehow the son and we have missed the point, verse 19 sums it up nicely. It drives the point home very solidly. It says, "So are the ways of everyone who gains by violence. It takes away the life of its possessors." Or such are the ways of everyone who is greedy for unjust gain. It takes away the life of its possessors. Such are the ways of a few people who are greedy for unjust gain.
No, mine says all.
Everybody! You will not escape.
If you look at some of those billionaires, you can see it. I mean, Herbert Hewlett, or whatever his name is.
Howard Hughes.
Howard Hughes, yeah, he's old. He doesn't really live. He's so
Spend your time worrying about someone stealing from you, perhaps.
Yeah.
But everybody is affected. If you seek after money like this, you pierce yourself with many pangs. There is no exception. I'm special. I'm different. No, you're not. This says you're not.
I can get away with it.
No, you won't. Because God knows what you're doing, even if no one else does, and He will settle the matter in the end. You cannot escape justice ultimately. It will find you. Sin will damage and destroy. There's no exception to this. Yet how often do we get tempted to think that we are the exception if we're involved in something? No!
All the sinners.
Sometimes we need exactly what Solomon started off with. Don't do it. But no!
Yeah.
Here's why, but I'm different. No, everyone who does this.
Don't even put your foot on it.
No exceptions.
There's something new under the sun. You have not been tempted farther than anyone else has.
Unjust gain clings to the criminal and eventually destroys him. Done. No sin is a victimless crime. To the one who is being sinned against, to the one who does the sinning. It's a deadly thing.
And it's the same thing when we work hours and hours and hours to get money and homes and cars for our kids, but we don't spend the time with our kids, and then we wonder what's wrong with the next generation. We were greedy for that gain, and this is the result of it. Who said you gotta have 2 cars in every garage, you know? But that is a thought.
2 cars won't fit in my garage.
I had a girlfriend tell me that God wants everybody to have a house and a car.
Really?
Jesus didn't have one.
Yeah, he walked everywhere he went, pretty much.
And you can't raise kids in an apartment. Really? I mean, that's the mentality that's got parents going overboard trying to get money to get things that they think they need. And their children are joining gangs and being immoral because we lost track of what we should be doing.
One of the best things to do in a situation like that, when someone brings that kind of a statement, challenge the presupposition. Here's how you do it. Why? Why do you think that? Did I read here? So why do you think that? Well, it's just so we should trust you?
Yeah. The house one is
The
really
infinite
good.
expression
Why?
of
So
wisdom
you can
is
have
you?
enough room so your children can spend
Yeah.
more time away from you.
It's better than a tent in the desert.
And God said that we should have abundance when we follow Him.
That's a culture thing.
Really?
What you talk about the cultural thing.
That's
is
TV.
we're-
Where
That's
is-
the American dream that
That's what I'm
everybody
saying.
bought into
That's
for
sin.
many years.
Yeah.
How does God define real abundance anyway? Himself. If we have